Well, welcome everybody. Great to see a almost full house. And I'm Andrew North, and I'm a journalist who's been covering Afghanistan for 20 years now. And I've been back again a couple of times since the Taliban took over. And of course, that's been a devastating blow for Afghan journalism, as many of you here in this room know. And for the country's wider media scene, which has really flourished over the last 20 years. One estimate is that at least 300 outlets have now closed down since the Taliban took over last year. Journalists have been attacked, critical voices censored, and I think probably, as some of you have seen now, foreign broadcasts have also now, some of them have been curtailed. Female journalists have been hit the hardest of all. Many journalists have fled abroad, and in fact, Shafi here is one of those who was recently in Afghanistan and then now is here. But before we go any further, I just wanted to just pause for a moment of silence and to reflect and remember the many journalists, mostly Afghan, but some foreign, who've paid the ultimate sacrifice reporting on Afghanistan over the last 20 years. And that's actually more than 80 over the last 20 years. So just I think if we could just pause for a second to think about that, think about these people. So how should the media respond to the situation now? The media that's still in Afghanistan, the journalists still there, the foreign media who are outside and journalists who are going in, and this new diaspora of Afghan journalists that's emerged as a result of what happened last year, who've now fled the country and are now setting up all around the world. And we're very lucky to have a great panel here today to talk about this, and who've all played a central role in the Afghan media story of the last 20 years from different perspectives. First of all, we have Zarghuna Kargar, and she's a journalist with the BBC, but who's been covering Afghanistan, covering her native country in lots of different ways for many years, including writing a book about women's lives in Afghanistan, and also presented the hugely successful Afghan Women's Hour. And most recently, you've been covering the impact of the Taliban on women in general and especially on women's journalists. Shafi Karimi is a multimedia journalist who I first got to know when he was working at Azadi in Kabul, the Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty operation. And he was doing some really great reporting, groundbreaking reporting on the situation, but then, unfortunately, as Shafi will tell you, he had to leave Afghanistan actually before the Taliban took over, at a time when many journalists were being attacked. And then, at the end of the table, probably for many of you, someone who needs very little introduction, Saad Mohseni, the chairman of MOBY Group, and the man who created Tolo TV and also Aman FM before that. And I think we could probably say that Tolo became in many ways the sun around which the planets of the Afghan media system over the last 20 years ended up revolving. And you really did kind of play a very important role in that. Now you are also, of course, having to adjust, so we're going to want to hear about that. But I would like to start by hearing from you, Zarghuna. We have this very provocative title to our talk. Is Afghan journalism dead?
No, and I hope it will never die. During this time, when the Kabul fell to the Taliban, there were days that I felt that Afghan journalism is gone, especially at the BBC, when hundreds of my colleagues left desperate for their life and desperate for a better situation for their kids and families. They left, and most of them came to UK. I thought it is the end, but I currently watch Afghan TV more than I used to do before, especially Tulu News, and I feel that there is a platform there for people. There is journalism, and there are journalists working in the country. And even the journalists like Shafi and my other friends and colleagues who have left Afghanistan, they're still very active on social media about what is going on in our country and what's happening to our people. But it is a very, very difficult situation, in my opinion, especially when I speak to my female colleagues and friends, especially for women. I think, when I think about the journalism in Afghanistan, for women, it's more in danger, and it's gone almost, which is heartbreaking, because I worked with a lot of women in the last 20 years, especially when I did Afghan Women's Hour for the BBC World Service. I trained over 25 female journalists. There were school students, there were university students, and some were actually housewives who had been at home during the Taliban regime, in the first regime. And then they came out of the Taliban regime and they wanted to find a way of a career for them. And then we hired some housewives and mothers to the program, because it was a women program, and they did the best of the stories for us in Dari and Pashto. I think for them, it's almost an end, and it really, really makes me sad. But for men, I think it's still there, maybe not in the same format. When I watch the Afghan TV, when I watch the Afghan media. Unfortunately, from international media, it's all gone a little bit, but it's because there are a lot of Afghan journalists in international media. We try day by day. I have Afghan colleagues at BBC World News TV. They do segments on Afghanistan every day in their show, and I try to bring a story, an idea of my country, so that our voice is still there. The voice of our people is still there.
Thanks, Zarghuna. Shafi, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you've ended up leaving your homeland, and now how you're setting up as a journalist abroad. But is Afghan journalism dead?
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. And, actually, no. I agree with Zarghuna Jan. But it's also, the journalism is not dead in Afghanistan, but it's not live as well. So it's between of these, it's wounded, you know? So it need to support it to survive. So I think all of you already read it about the survey that our service did about 3 months ago, that since the Taliban took over the Afghanistan, so 14% of Afghans media have closed it, and 18% of women and journalists have lost their jobs. So for now, you know that it's not a very good situation for all of them. Actually, last night I talked with one of my former colleagues in Afghanistan, and I asked him that, do you want to leave Afghanistan, or what's your plan? What do you want to do? He told me that, no, I don't want to leave Afghanistan, and I want to be here, and I want to do my job in Afghanistan. So if everyone should leave their country, who can report it from Afghanistan? So who can do their job? So, you know, Afghan journalists, they want to be still in Afghanistan, and they want to be working in Afghanistan, and they want to do their job in Afghanistan, but they need to support, you know? We should support them. For now, there is many problems in Afghanistan, actually for media and for journalists. So it's not only the security reason, also economic. So maybe for some media in Afghanistan, there is not a problem, but for most of them, it's a big problem. Like a lot of them in some province of Afghanistan, they're already closed. And there is, you know, like radios, televisions, newspapers, and all of them. So they need to be supported by your side, by everyone, that they can do it. So I mean that they are still in Afghanistan, and they are reporting from Afghanistan like Tulu News. And here, Sajan, he will tell you more about what they are doing right now in Afghanistan. But our colleagues are already do their jobs in Afghanistan in such a situation, you know. Every day one journalist is arrested by the Taliban, and no one tell you that why the Taliban arrested a journalist. With no one, you know, you were arrested by the Taliban without any reason. And when you release it from the prison of the Taliban, so no one tell you that why Taliban arrested a journalist. Like a few days ago, Bismillah in Kandahar arrested by the Taliban. Right now, someone in Ghor, and maybe in a future more journalists. So this is our life. But journalists in Afghanistan don't want. If the Taliban think that they will silence the voice of us in Afghanistan, it's not correct, and they can do it. Like if they do it in Afghanistan, so we are in here, we can raise our voice from here. So, but for me, I left Afghanistan on April 2021. Sorry, on about 1 year ago. So, on that time it was a very bad situation, also like this. Every day we lost one of our colleagues. Once years ago, when I left Afghanistan, I lost my colleague in Helmand province, Ilyas Dai, and also at the same time we lost Yamas Yavash in Kabul. So I think we are in a fighting. You know, we lost our colleagues in a way for freedom of speech, but we never stop.
Thank you, Shafi. Now, Saad, you decided to keep Tolo going. Some people have criticized you for that. Why did you decide to stay?
I think, firstly, because we didn't have much of a choice. The Taliban captured Kabul months and months before anyone expected them to prevail. So we were basically caught running the business as the Taliban, as the city of Kabul fell. So it was a big surprise to us. We had contingency plans to move a lot of our people out. And then we felt we had no choice but to keep going. And it's been very dramatic. And I think that, you know, of the people, we looked at the numbers last year of the former and existing colleagues of the fallen journalists. A fifth of them belong to us. They either worked for us or had worked for us. So we've obviously paid a very heavy price. Our employees are like members of our family. Many have started their careers working for us. Many who worked at, you know, like this young man worked for Radio Free Europe. You started his career with us, yeah.
BBC colleagues is now your head.
That too. So the Afghan media was heavily subsidized by the international community, directly and indirectly. We benefited from that too, because the funding that came in for the health sector, for the education sector, and the advertising that was allocated benefited all the media in Afghanistan. But a lot of media organizations, the smaller ones, were obviously subsidized by the international community. And as big as we were, we needed those smaller organizations, you know, Itla'at Rose and even the BBC and others, because it was their investigative reports helped us in terms of, you know, exposing corrupt officials and the nepotism in the country. And, you know, we really took on the establishment, we as in the entire media family. And we took on both sides. We took on the American side, the Afghan government side, as well as the Taliban in terms of the violence. You know, that's been ongoing for 40-odd years now. But I think what sort of struck us at the time was that we were having an impact, I felt. We as in the media family. And of course, we're continuing to pay a price, just like you. 3 of our people were arrested, perhaps held in the same building as you only 2 weeks ago. But I think everything we need to report on, we managed to get out. I think that's the single most important thing, whether it's about women's education, or corruption, or thuggery, or violence, including your apprehension. These things get covered. one way or another. I think that's the most important thing. Now, we're not as aggressive as we used to be, understandably. But so I think we're having an impact. I think that, you know, the footage of those girls crying outside the school, that was all our footage. Much of what you see comes from Afghan media, and I think our presence is therefore very important. Something I pointed out to in my talk a couple of days ago with Bobby, that, you know, we had 8 women working for our news operation in August of last year. Now we have 22. So we have more women. Do they have limitations? Yes. It's funny, there was a press conference by the ulama to condemn the recent decision to ban girls' education, but our female reporter was not allowed in. But so we have these contradictions.
But you've had to sort of take them off screen
No.
for the most part. But for the most part,
No,
compared
no,
to
no.
how it used to be, no?
No, well, they're on the screen, but they're obviously a lot more covered up.
Yeah.
You know, but we have actually more women on the screen as well, and we managed to have our live shows and discussion shows. I'm talking about the news side of things. Yeah. Entertainment as well. I mean, the chat shows do have female presenters. The old presenters, they're just a bit more covered up. But on the news side, it's interesting. You know, you have a Taliban member, and then you have you have Mahbouba Sarraj in Kabul, and then you have a female women's rights activist in Norway or in London, you know, having this discussion. The only thing is that the media is alive today, but I cannot guarantee tomorrow. This is the issue. So we have no visibility, we have no guarantees. Just this week, we've had a couple of interesting discussions with the minister himself, as well. The UN also met with him today, because I just got a note from the UN. In the days of Karzai and Ashraf Ghani, we had a media commission, media complaints commission, effectively protecting the media. So rather than the Ministry of Interior or Defense or Intelligence going and arresting people or questioning people, it all went via the commission. So we've been pushing for this commission, which now the government has agreed that it would reestablish. Therefore, you know, there's perhaps some hope that that just dealing with the Ministry of Information and Culture will give us a degree of protection. But the problem is, the Taliban movement is a sort of it's a pretty fragmented movement, and people take things, you know, it's basically it's whatever you can get. So if a ministry thinks that that they have the authority, they will come into your office and they will walk around with their armed men. They can arrest you if they want to. So we have no safety nets today, and this is what makes it very difficult. So we have 500 employees, and we feel very exposed without that safety net, which we got used to for 20-odd years.
And how long do you think you can carry on going like that when, as you said, you just had 3 journalists were arrested, constant pressure? Do you think you can carry on like this? Well,
you know, we're going to hang on for as long as we can. We're not going to voluntarily leave. We will leave when we're shut down, basically.
Zarghuna, you're obviously talking to journalists and friends and family back in Afghanistan all the time. What's your sense of how hard it is now for journalists to kind of to operate, and are things getting harder and harder?
If you don't mind, I just want to focus on the women. It's very, very hard for them. As Saad said, you see women going, there is a press conference invite, and when women reporters go, the female reporters go, they are not allowed. They say like, okay, it depends on which ministry it is, which minister it is. So they are not sure, like, is this one government or a few governments running their own little empire in each ministry? So it is very difficult. One journalist I was speaking to, she used to be a reporter for the national TV. She said she feels like she's dying every day. She feels like she's a prisoner. A lot of the national TV reporters, news anchors, they lost their jobs. They were told not to come to work the next day when the Taliban took over. And it has had lots of precautions for them, not only in terms of losing job, in terms of looking after families. Some were like the only breadwinners for their families. Some were evacuated without their children and husband. When one of them I know, I cannot name, she was evacuated to Spain on the second day of the Taliban takeover with the help of some Spanish journalists. And when she went, she has 3 young children. The youngest is 2. She was like in a desperate situation to get her family out, obviously young children without their mom. I feel very emotional about her case because I am a mom and I have a 2-year-old daughter. My youngest is 2. And I was speaking to her every day, even though she spoke to us on the BBC World News a few times about her experience, what happened, but the consequences that this situation has had for her. For example, she managed to get visas for her kids and for the husband. And on the day when the plane was waiting and the husband and the kids could go on the plane, something happened in her husband's head. He said, "We are not coming. I'm not bringing my kids to Spain." So she is almost broken. It's a mom, but it was all her job. That it was the consequences of what she did. And for other young reporters, journalism students, it is a very hopeless situation for women. Women are omitted from the scenes, from public spaces. I watched Tulu TV, and I watched it before when Ariana Saeed, one of the top singers, was coming, and she was leading a TV show, and then a lot of young Afghan singers, female singers, were coming, and they had this wonderful music show. We were all watching it as a family in UK. I have lived in the UK for more than 20 years. So for us, the only channel to connect with our country was Tulu TV, and this entertainment. You would see women and men sitting together, enjoying. Those things are gone. All I see from Tulu TV now is news, which is obviously very important for us. But that kind of entertainment is gone from the life of my life, and most importantly from life of Afghans inside, from life of my cousins who are young girls who are not allowed to go to school, and they have nothing apart from news of the so-and-so mullah did this, so-and-so mullah did this. It's all about mullahs. It's all about sheikhs. It's a bit boring, and it's heartbreaking. And this new generation of Afghanistan, new young men and young women, they were so democratic comparing to my generation. They were so thirsty for modernization. I saw them, and they was just like always when my friends told me, like, "Do you miss doing the Afghan Women's Hour?" I said, "No, I did it in a very good time because the country needed that kind of guidance, and the women needed that kind of guidance." Now they are much more advanced than me or that program we did 10 or 15 years ago. It's like the country is gone so far. We have lots of English speakers among the young generation, and lots of cool kids who want their country, who love their flag, and that is all gone from our life. And imagine when a country doesn't have music, imagine when a country is not allowed to have a female singer on the screen, imagine when a country is not allowed to have a female filmmaker. What kind of country is that? It's a dead country in terms of your soul, in terms of what you get from your everyday life. And most important, when girls don't go to school, next year we will not have 12th grade girls applying for university. And this is like all have like a very long-term, awful, dark consequences, which I cannot easily digest.
I mean, absolutely, and I think what I want to just jump in and add on to that, though, I think there is all of that. At the same time, Afghanistan is such a different country to the one 20 years ago when the Taliban last lost power. And what you have now is you have all that spirit, all that aspiration, democratic values, especially in the cities, but you now have this very connected country, which simply didn't exist. I remember the first time I went to Afghanistan after the fall of the Taliban, and the only way you could get in touch with someone is I had a satellite phone, and obviously most people didn't have a satellite phone, so you just go around and knock on their door and leave a message if they weren't there. There was no cell phones, there was no internet, and now Afghanistan is connected to the world. It's a very young country, one of the youngest in the world. And Shafi, in a way, you are kind of almost like that bridge, because you are very tech savvy, far more tech savvy than I am. And I wanted you to talk about what you have been doing, especially on Twitter, where you've been setting up these Twitter spaces, where often you end up having Taliban figures joining in your conversations with diaspora Afghans outside. Tell us about that, and what's the kind of the value of that?
Okay, as you know better, it's very difficult for now to make a report against the Taliban in Afghanistan, so it's very difficult. If you do it, or if you did it, so it means that you are playing with the fire. So if you are arrested by the Taliban, or maybe killed by the Taliban. So I just thinking that, so right now this is the situation in my country. What I can do for the people that they raise their voice and to talk about what's going on in Afghanistan. I think it's for now a great platform, that Twitter space, so people can come, join, and talk about everything as they want. So mostly I'm just creating this space maybe in a 1 week, 2 or 3 weeks. So people from everywhere of the Afghanistan, they are joining in the space, and they are just talking about what's going on their districts and everywhere of Afghanistan. Like, it's very difficult to people come with a real ID and talk about against the Taliban. So I think it's good that they're coming there and they're camps there and talk with a fake ID. Like, I'm living in this place, and today this is happening in my around my home in this address like this. So, you know, for now the Taliban has used much Twitter, and they are active too much in Twitter, and they have lots of followers, every one of them. And when I created this space, they're already always joining in this space, and they're just listening to the people, what people told about them. And sometimes they are joining as a speaker, and they want to answer for the people. Sometimes, if someone comes with the real ID from Afghanistan, you know, Taliban warning him, and we will find you, like this. So even people can raise their voice. There is no freedom of speech in Afghanistan. The journalists are also the same. I want to share you the experience when I worked with Tulu News on 2018. Explosion was in a part of Kabul, and we have a live broadcasting from the emergency hospital on that time. On that time, I produced the shows for Tulu News. Someone comes near to the camera, in front of the camera, and he told that I want to talk about something. So it's a live broadcasting, and he talk about everything, and he just ask many questions from the president, and talk much more, you know? There's no one other reaction about it. Not president, no one, you know? And there's nothing happening. But right now, when you come, even in a Twitter space, or even you want to write in a Facebook or some other platforms, they will find you and they will arrest you. So it means that there is no freedom of speech in Afghanistan, and no one can talk against the Taliban. So.
But sorry to interrupt. Does that make these Twitter spaces useful, or is it actually then dangerous?
No, I think it's useful, because, you know, it's not always in a Persian and Pashto language. So sometimes we created this, the people can come and talk in English. So we have more audience from international organizations from around the world, that they are coming and listening to our voice, what people talking about Afghanistan. And they know what's going on in Afghanistan. So I think it's useful, because we have to talk about it. You know, we can't be silent that Taliban did everything as they want, and so I think it's useful, much useful, and they can write it about it, and they can publish something about it. So I know that many organizations publish news about our space that we created in Twitter. So yes, and I think it's useful. So for now, if we can't make a report from the television, radio, or newspaper, I think it's good to become here to talk in Twitter space, or even in Facebook. But one thing with Facebook, I'm really, yeah, I'm really sad because it's about 3 months that my Facebook is blocked from. Yes, and I talked with the Meta company last about it was yeah, 2 days ago, and I talked with them that what's happened when I write Taliban, you blocked me. Yes,
I know,
I'm blocking from Facebook. I can't post, I can't comment or even like.
Yeah.
Because I write something against the Taliban.
I wonder if someone from Facebook is listening to this. I mean, it does also make me think. I was interviewing a Taliban official in Kabul, I think in December, who was also complaining about Facebook blocking all their posts, and was saying that maybe we need to take action against Facebook. But it seems like in your case, Shafi, you're excuse me, you're being blocked simply for using the word Taliban, and there are many cases like this, of course, and I think not just with that word, and perhaps if someone from Facebook is listening, perhaps Shafi, you can have a further conversation, because here we are trying to tell the story of Afghanistan, and it seems like one of the main outlets is making it a lot harder. I want to open things up for questions at some point, but I just thought I want to go back to you, Saad, for a moment to kind of, we have a picture at the moment where, the general trend of things is it's getting harder. We're dealing with obviously an authoritarian movement, and I think there was probably almost like a sort of an early period after the fall of Kabul, after the Taliban took over, when certainly for the foreign media, it was relatively easier to report, and I think that kind of, and of course, at the same time as Afghan journalists were already feeling the heat, but generally the kind of the trend line seems to be things are getting harder. What can be done, and what kind of support can the outside world offer in terms of helping stories to be told from inside Afghanistan? I mean, and also, are there dangers in that? I wonder if you've got any thoughts on that, Saad.
Well, I think that just in terms of criticism of the Taliban, to be fair to all the courageous people on the ground who come on television and every day criticize the Taliban, there is criticism. They're just measured. And journalists as well. I think it's unfair to say that people cannot criticize the Taliban. You just have to watch television every night to see that for yourself. But of course, it's not like it used to be, where, two of the most outspoken people, Dr. Shafi Mohseni was arrested after making a big statement on our TV station and held for 24 hours. But then he was also released because of all the publicity on the Afghan media, and others as well. But what can the world do? I think helping small organizations, is very important. Helping the bigger ones too, I think we all need help. But I think especially helping the smaller ones in terms of, we've talked to Facebook as well as Google in terms of what security they can provide. So if you're doing reports and filing them, what's the security can you provide them with technology-wise? The other one, which is obvious because they took your phone away, is that as soon as they arrest you, they open it up and they look at your WhatsApp messages and Telegram and everything else they can get their hands on. So unless you have this sort of, you can delete them every day, program to delete every day, you're pretty exposed. I think these sorts of small things we need help with, how to send dispatch reports to the outside world, even to people like us in the provinces. Our provincial guys are much more vulnerable. As a matter of fact, in one of the provinces, they were arrested last week and forced to resign. And of course, within 24 hours, they're back with us because they just signed the resignation letters in order to get out of the police station. So I think this is what you can help with. But how do we train these people to investigate things? I think there is an opportunity. I don't want to be too hopeful, but there is an opportunity that they will find this middle ground, because there are Taliban who are pragmatic. They understand that they have to exist in this world. Aid and humanitarian aid as well as development aid will. People say that there shouldn't be any conditions with humanitarian aid, but there's a real possibility that their belligerence will result even the humanitarian aid getting reduced because of Ukraine and so many other things. So I think a lot of them are cognizant of, that they have to behave. And I think the UN has been playing a really constructive role because no one else is in Kabul. The UN Special Representative Deborah Lyons, who you know probably from your days in Kabul, has been very effective. As a matter of fact, she was very helpful in terms of the release of our 3 people. And we had a meeting with the Ministry of Information and Culture 2 days ago. She followed up with that today. And now they've committed to set up a commission before May the 3rd, which is World Freedom Day or something or other. So I think this is where the world can help. So ongoing training, security in terms of reporting on issues, capacity building, help in terms of support for the media sector and civil society in general. These are all the things you can help with. And of course, funding for the small organizations and for doing investigative reports.
And what about getting journalists out? Because as you know, lots and lots of journalists would actually like to leave the country.
But the issue is that this is the conundrum for us. You know, if you give the 40 million Afghans inside of Afghanistan the opportunity to leave, I would say 95% of them would leave because life is just terrible there. I mean, people are begging, you know, proud individuals with degrees who were, you know, ambitious. This aspirational new class of Afghans have been reduced to begging on the streets of Kabul. So, but I think it's better. I mean, it's better for everyone if we can help Afghanistan. You know, 200,000 people have left, but 40 million people remain in the country. We have a population growth of 3%. Between now and 12 months from now, we'll have 1.3 million extra Afghans.
On that kind of somewhat bleak note, I'd like to open things up to the floor if anyone's got any questions. And what we're going to do, because of the COVID rules, if you can come up to the front and just speak your question into the microphone, then at least it'll go out onto the recording, and then we'll try to answer. But can you come to the front?
Can I say from Law, can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, and I will repeat it then. Yeah.
I just want to understand, because a lot of Afghan, like the reporting, especially from the West, in terms of journalism, the narrative is always, we've known the history where a lot of Afghanistan, the war, the military artillery was backed by the US, and there was both sides of it. But even still, when we read reportage on Afghanistan, it's never claimed that the West, in a negative way, the narrative still remains the same. And do you think that's one of the problems, that people don't know the problem in Afghanistan? Of course, you know what's happening on ground, but do you think, is there a larger picture? Are there major players behind it? And someone should take responsibility. Is it the US? Is it backed by someone? Because we know that went down in history, and we have reports which said that the US pumped in a lot of money in Afghanistan. And probably the problems today are a result of what happened. But do we see that narrative in Western media coverage? Or even in Middle East, you know, like Al Jazeera or Vice India covered, or Vice Middle East covered?
If I understand you right, are you saying that there's not enough coverage of how things got to the situation they're in now, that the Taliban are back in power?
Exactly.
I mean, I personally would push back on that, because there was a lot of coverage, certainly last August, when the American withdrawal, the American pullout happened, which basically allowed the Taliban then to come in off the back of it. And but is that what you're saying is that there's not enough coverage of this to understand what's happening?
Coverage, but the narrative is different. You know, are we still pointing a finger at the US for the problem that existed, or is the Western coverage, like from the New York Times or the Guardian or the Washington Post, is it still, like, as people from Afghanistan, or you've seen the battle on ground and you've seen the struggle, you've seen your friends losing lives, and do you still think that the larger power is not being blamed, that we are looking at the smaller picture and ignoring the larger players?
Okay. Zarghuna, would you like to take that?
The larger power is definitely to be blamed. They left Afghanistan with nothing. They left in the middle of the night. They escaped. They left Bagram Air Base empty. And this is what every Afghan you speak to, they will tell you. Whether it's a woman, a man, a child, that the US left them with nothing. And even yesterday we were discussing with other colleagues, especially Belal knows a lot about this, that even the officials were not supported, the military was not supported. So Afghans know, but because the situation, I just quote one of the women from Tulu News. Sorry, I watch a lot of Tulu News. I think I refer to Tulu News a lot because they bring, it was one of the women who joined from Germany, I think. It was a woman rights activist. She said, we saw what the West did to our country. They left us. Now it's up to us Afghans because we shouldn't trust them anymore. And that's the feelings Afghans have. And one other Afghan woman, one of the most top judges in Afghanistan, most of the judges lost their jobs. She was telling me that she will never forgive them. She will never forgive America for what they have done. They gained so much in the last 20 years, and they left them with nothing. And they are to blame. Every Afghan I know, at least, they blame the US.
Anyone want to add to that? Do you want to add to that,
No, I'm
Shafi?
agree with
No.
I think there are many people to blame. I went to middle school when I was 11, when the coup d'etat happened in 1978. It's been a long time. And we go back long enough, we can blame every empire as to what's transpired in Afghanistan, a series of mistakes, one after the other. I think collectively, I think as Afghans, I think ultimately we have to blame ourselves. We also had 20 years of enormous opportunities to build on the goodwill of the international community, hundreds of billions of dollars that went into the country. We had a corrupt, inept government that led to the rise of the Taliban. You know, there's an adage that that oppositions don't win, governments lose power or elections or whatever. So I think that we tried our best. I mean, I think whether it's with BBC or, Shafi's outlet, Radio Free Europe, or our outlet, we talked about these things on a daily basis. But the international community was content to work with this government that was corrupt. And then when they decided to leave, they left in a manner that they deprived the military of the contractors, of planning and monitoring, of everything. So effectively, they take away your weapons and the will to fight, and they said you're on your own. So I don't want to talk about that. That's a totally different discussion. But it's not. The Americans have, and everyone, they had every right to leave. It's just the way they left, which I think angers a lot of Afghans. And this was a decision made by the U.S. President, Joe Biden, and he obviously had his own country's interests at heart. But I think this will eventually come back to bite Western nations in the way it was done. Afghanistan will continue to contribute to drugs, perhaps to terrorism, and certainly to refugees. And it's something that what happens in Afghanistan doesn't always stay in Afghanistan.
Yeah. Just one example I wanted to give this. My cousin is about 22 years old. He was in the special forces with the Americans. And during the evacuation, they evacuated him, and he has a baby girl with his wife to Washington, to Georgia. I think he's in Georgia now. Before just the collapse of Taliban, he was fighting in Jalalabad. And whenever we spoke to him, his spirit was that I love my country. I might die, I might live, but I'm going to fight for this flag, for this country. So this was the spirit of ordinary Afghan soldiers on the ground. The government was corrupt, but there was a feeling of nationalism, of our identity, of our country among the young generation, which I saw. We were so worried about him, and he got injured. He was brought injured to the airport during the evacuation and just went without even saying goodbye to his family. So this was the spirit of ordinary Afghans, and unfortunately we didn't have good officials.
Bobby.
Can I ask, we hear about...
For the question, I would ask you to go to the table and speak into the microphone. Otherwise, for the last 3 minutes...
I can also kind of add the question, but Bobby, you come up here.
But okay, now we hear about the conditions in which Afghan journalists are working. We hear a little bit about the conditions in Western journalists are working. We don't hear at all about what foreign but non-Western journalists are, what are their working conditions? Chinese journalists, Russian journalists, Pakistani journalists. What's going on with them? Do they have access? Do they have are they under the same restrictions? Are they more free to move around? Are they making the effort to tell the story more accurately. I'd be curious to know your thoughts on that.
I can give some insights on that, because there are certainly Pakistani journalists,
Female as well.
female, exactly, female and male, openly working, and because actually, especially in the case of Pakistan, because of the close links with the Taliban, they have often got particularly good access. And so there's one particular Pakistani journalist I know who has got access to the Haqqanis, which is something that is not on offer to me. And so, in a way, you could say journalism is kind of following the ebb and flow of where power lies. And so, a journalist who is linked with a particular country which has the access will get the access. Chinese journalists I haven't encountered. Indian journalists, there were certainly some at around the time of the fall of Kabul in August through into September. Far fewer now. What there is on the ground, though, is it's a smaller community, but there is a community of foreign journalists in the broadest sense, not just Westerners. There are Iranian journalists, there are Polish journalists, and they're filing from multiple outlets, most of them freelance. And then there is a core of what you would call the mainstream Western press who still are sending people in. But it's a very cut down community compared to what it used to be. Yeah, sure.
I just wanted to add one example about Pakistani journalists. The first press conference where Zabiullah Mujahid held, one of the first female journalists who asked the question was a Pakistani female journalist from PTV, I think. And on the day when the Taliban announced that Afghan women are not allowed to travel without a company, male company, to anywhere else, a Pakistani journalist on her own, a female journalist, landed in Kabul, and she was taking selfies with no burqa, just her usual Pakistani shalwar kameez. So they are quite free. Pakistan is quite free in Afghanistan, whether it's a female or a male journalist.
And also, just I want to mention one thing also, that at the first round that the women's protest in Afghanistan, and one woman journalist from Pakistan, he comes to Afghanistan and he just makes report about this protest. And when she went back to Pakistan and she invited in a morning show, she talked about it. You know, she not talked about the real things what's going on in Afghanistan, mostly about the protest. Against this protest, she's talking. So, you know, it's not a good thing, I think. You don't share the real things, what's going on in Afghanistan, and you come and you do the reporting from Afghanistan like much different. So it's not just about the Pakistani journalists. I don't want to mention all of them, no, some of them. Like it's about other countries as well. So we need for them, if they want to go and making reports from Afghanistan, please show the real face that what Taliban do in Afghanistan, not a different face of the Taliban. I don't know about the Taliban, so it's a different case with Andrew that is arrested by the Taliban. So up to now, he's also don't know that what's the reason. I'm right?
I mean, essentially, they never gave a clear reason, but initially they picked me up saying that I had the wrong identification.
Yeah,
and then,
but it's not with all the foreign journalists that they are wants to go to Afghanistan and make report around Afghanistan, and the Taliban, you know, have a good cooperation with them. Yeah.
Some of them, they say they feel very safe there.
Yes.
With the Taliban. You know the case of the New Zealand journalist.
Yeah, and
you know, like, it was an insult to all of us. It's just like she was going. And the Pakistani journalist, sorry to jump in, was talking on her Pakistani TV channel and criticizing Afghan women for asking for too much democracy. And this is the irony of Afghanistan now.
So it's just...
The other thing I just wanted to address, though, is, as you know, on social media, there's now this kind of constant kind of argument going on between Afghans who are inside the country still, and may probably more, the most vocal will be the ones who are more pro-Taliban, and then the diaspora outside. And let's face it, there's also at times a lot of sharing of old video clips that are then, it's said that they are something that's happened recently. There's a lot of kind of fake news that is being put out. Is that just noise, do you think, that is actually confusing the picture, or do you think there is actually some value in that discussion that's going on?
I think it's that, like, in the past, that Taliban's fighting with the government of Afghanistan, always they are sharing something in Twitter account, they're tweeting something, fake news. It's like fighting in social media, you know, to propaganda. You always tweeting that we are fighting in this district, in here. So I think it's the same thing is going right now. The foreign, the people that, the citizens of Afghanistan, that they're living out of the country, they're just sharing some pictures or videos, something from the past. And they show that right now, like, fighting is going on in Panjshir or some other province of Afghanistan with the Taliban. So it's like, I think it's a social media fighting. So they want to be, I don't know how I can explain it, but it's, I think with this fake news, we don't go in the right way. Yeah, I'm not agree with this at all, yeah. We need to, I think we need to tweet, or we need to post everything as real, not the fake news, like, and it will be not good for the journalism, and mostly for the citizen journalism as well, because everyone can post something not real, so it will not a good way, I think.
Akanksha, you have a question. Come on up. Good to see you, an old BBC friend.
Thank you. Andrew, I'm going to come back to the security question. I think that's very, very important when you talk about journalism, and any journalism will only sustain itself or will stay alive if journalists are safe. My question is, I'm someone who commissions a lot of stories from South Asia. And now when I'm going to do that from Afghanistan, from the local journalists in Herat, in other places, how do I even get money to them in the first place? First of all. And on top of it, there's a moral obligation that I have that they are safe if they're reporting for me, if they're reporting for an outlet like us, which is seen as the Western media, obviously. So what kind of checks and balances do you think now are evolving, emerging? Is there any safety net? That's something that I'm just very, very curious about as a professional who follows Afghanistan and obviously have worked with you people before. So just want to know about that.
I think that's an excellent question. Maybe, Saad, would you like to take a first go at that?
Yeah, I think Western Union is now working again. It's on and off, but also the Hawala system. If you're in the region, you can give money to someone.
But I can't pay through with like the bureaucratic
No, you can't.
systems.
Akanksha works for Deutsche Welle,
Well,
so I don't think the Germans like that kind of
the
system.
UN and the development world is also using the Hawala system, and sending $140 million in cash on a monthly basis. So in terms of safety nets, you have none. So if that's going to be the obstacle to you doing stories, you're not going to do any stories. But what you can do is by giving money to these kids, is you're going to help their families survive. I think you have to make that decision. By the way, we never felt safe even during the Ashraf Ghani's time, or Karzai's time. We had the Taliban, but we also had this predatory police force and this dangerous police force that also took it upon themselves to arrest people and beat people up. We've had 3 arrests under the Taliban, but we had something like 36 arrests, including myself, during the previous administrations too. So I think you have to make that clear choice. That, you're dealing with Afghanistan. It's a difficult place.
I just want to add to that is one sort of thought I've got is whether there is something that it should become more of a policy idea. We've heard that obviously the plan is at the moment is that, well, some of it's already underway, is that the United Nations will fund salaries for teachers in Afghanistan, for the health service and so on. Do you think it would help, Saad, if there was a kind of more organized effort to kind of pay salaries and help the media in Afghanistan in that same kind of way?
It's always more difficult. UNICEF with the World Bank, and I think USAID indirectly is committed to help teachers, but now it's been suspended. Certainly the World Bank assistance has been suspended because of this school ban. It's difficult. I mean, it's, you want to punish the Taliban regime, but you end up punishing the Afghan nation. But at the same time, you don't want these guys to get away with things. I don't have any clear answers, except to say that I would rather err on the more generous side, if possible. In terms of journalists, I think the UN's working on certain programs. I think programmatic assistance, like if a particular group, like at La Rose or his organization, they want to do 4 stories a year, fund those programs. I think that's an easier way of funding projects rather than sort of giving money for operational costs. That's one way of doing it, because then you as a BBC or your organization can also benefit from those reports. There are many ways of, and I'd be happy to give you some ideas, but I think it's probably perhaps a good way of keeping that sector alive.
Got a few more questions. Who was first? I think I saw you with your hand up first, Brian. There, yeah. You want to come forward?
Yeah. So.
Just tell us who you're representing as well.
My name's Brian Conley. I've been supporting Alive in Afghanistan since August 16th. So that's what I wanted to know is having opened a news agency on the day that the Taliban took Kabul, what advice do you guys have for Afghan journalists who are working there, or also for us to support them? I mean, I'm the only foreigner really working with them. It's all Afghans. I'm just mentoring them, trying to find support, figure out how to make it sustainable. Yeah, so if you have advice for Afghans who are just starting or who are still working.
I mean, we can help amplify your stories, as we work with Pajwak and other agencies. And I think for us, it's safety in numbers. And I think that a lot of people are cognizant of how important the media is, and Bobby titled our talk as the canary in the coal mine. Because I think that even the Taliban realized killing the media sector, especially prominent ones, is going to actually work against them. So if we work and we amplify those stories, we bring them in, we interview them, I think in a lot of ways will help them. It will help if you're willing to work with us.
Another question, Shafi, quickly.
Yes, I agree with Sajjan, and also you can find some individual journalists as well from around Afghanistan, and also it's like I mentioned it in my speech that it's like supporting that you support the journalists in Afghanistan. So they really need to be works with such a international agencies or organization. I think the first way is that Sajjan has told you, and the second way you can find some individual journalists as well. Yeah.
And do you help the female ones as well?
Yeah,
do you have female?
We're currently, I think, 30 or 40%
wow.
female, and that's actually a big limit. We don't want to hire more journalists.
Okay.
I can hire a journalist in Helmand tomorrow, but I don't want to hire more male journalists without keeping female journalists and also ethnically diverse.
Yeah.
Another question there. I think Susanna, you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Susanna from Afghan Journalist Safety Committee / International Media Support Organization. And I just came back. I was 6 weeks in Afghanistan. And what I can say, I traveled all around the country, and what I could see kind of like that, yes, the media is struggling. A lot of media have been closed. But at the same time that I saw kind of like a solidarity, I saw kind of like the guys and the women, they're kind of like secretly meeting. The women advocacy groups met every week. The guys in the provinces, somehow they try to find out how to struggle, support each other. They shared they bread and money what they had at the same time. And of course that they try to create the safety network what's possible. So right at the moment there's a situation that the 34 provincial offices are open. There are a lot of secret networks, signal groups discussing issues, and they are threatened and beaten, of course, more or less like daily. But I saw first time, I've been in Afghanistan over 10 years, that somehow that there's a less competition. There's kind of like a moral support, but also like kind of like that they try to be creative how to survive. And
Susanna, sorry to interrupt.
This
Do you
is
have
somehow,
a question?
So I have a question somehow that how kind of like feed and use the opportunity at the same time that there are less competition between the media outlets because there are less media. So what can you do in this situation?
You know what I'm going to do? Because I know there's more questions. I'm going to kind of put them all together, and let's see if we can get over there. Nadia.
Thank you for such an interesting talk. You know, historically, in other contexts, in the face of state repression, kind of cultural, artistic, media, literary life has been forced underground. You know, like in the Soviet Union, there was samizdat, that kind of self-published publications which are kind of circulated in secret. Is there a version of an underground life that has emerged in Afghanistan in the wake of the Taliban takeover?
You don't want to...
I know definitely that with girls' education, it's happening. I know in Kandahar, one educator who has been having schools for younger and older girls for all these years, and he said that they have kept it's good that they have allowed this schools for 6 years till grade 6, but there are some girls who will go, and then they will continue their education for higher education as well. So there are like homeschoolings and groups getting together, teachers doing it for free for girls. There are things like that, but one downside of that when in the past, when the Taliban regime collapsed and Afghan women came out with the education they had, it was unofficial, so they were not accepted anywhere. It was not easy for them to get accepted as an educated person in the society, so it took them longer time comparing to the men to get to where they wanted.
Shafi, do you want to add to that?
Actually, no, I think
just addressing Susanna's question.
Actually, there did lots of work for the Afghan journalists in Afghanistan from past 10 years, I think, or 9 years, if I'm correct. So I think is it okay? They did a great job. So. Actually, I don't have any answer to the question of Suzanne, but just I wanna, in my last speech and last speaking, I wanna tell you that I'm appreciated from my colleagues that they are still in Afghanistan and they are working and they are reporting from Afghanistan. And just at the end, once again, I wanna tell you that if the Taliban think that they will silence us, it's not. They can't do it. Never. Like right now, you know, Tolun uses just continue the broadcasting, and they are making the reports from everywhere of Afghanistan. So we are in here, and from here we can make the reports. So this is our life, and we will continue it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one thing about the cultural
seconds.
issues, and of course to John, that a lot of Afghans fled Afghanistan, but not to the US and Europe, but to Central Asia, to Turkey, to Pakistan. Yeah. And now we've created various platforms for them. We have 60 or 70 million, sometimes 100 million views on YouTube alone for the entertainment stuff that we do from outside of Afghanistan. We do 15 to 20 music clips alone every month, which is more than what MTV did at its peak. Obviously not the production values of MTV. And we're giving voice to the poets and to the artists and others. We're going to be doing a lot more content from outside. And basically, you know, the Taliban are the enemies of fun. I mean, but so we have to keep fun alive and culture alive from outside the country, and we're committed to that, but from outside.
Thanks very much, Saad, and Zarghuna, thanks very much, and Shafi, thank you very much. Thanks everyone for coming.